Hello everyone, welcome back. I hope you had a lovely break. I'm delighted to welcome our next plenary speaker, Mandy Hill. Mandy is the Managing Director of Cambridge University Press and the newly appointed Vice President of the Publishers Association. She is responsible for the quality, performance and strategic direction of publishing worldwide across the breadth of Cambridge's academic portfolio. She is also responsible for her two cats called Dylan and Fluffy. She is the Equality, Diversity, Inclusivity and Belonging Champion and also chairs the Product Ethics and EDIB Committee. Mandy joined the press in 2014 from Oxford University Press, where she had worked for over 15 years. Today, Mandy is going to be speaking to us about the impact of digital disruption on the academic publishing industry. Her session will focus on the question, will university presses disrupt or be disrupted by digital innovations and transformations? There will be opportunity to ask questions at the end, but for now, let me hand over to Mandy.
Thank you, Isabel, and thank you for mentioning the wonderful Dylan and Fluffy. If anyone has questions about them later, I'm happy to take those. Do have lots of photos I can share as well. So, yes, I'm going to talk about digital disruption. That's what I'm here to talk about. And I know there are some non-university press publishers in the room. Not everything I'm going to say is going to be directed purely at university presses, but I will have a particular slant. So, digital disruption. It sounds like quite a scary phrase quite often, disruption. When we talk about transformation, it often sounds a little bit more, I don't know, when you talk about someone's being transformed, it sounds like something on a dating show or a house transformation, that something's been quite positive. But disruption, it sounds really quite negative. But sometimes that disruption is really healthy for us and actually just what we need. I think digital disruptions have impacted publishing and university presses over many years. I mean, to be honest, it's been part of the over 30 years I've been in publishing, and that's part of what's made it interesting. I think I would have been very bored by now had it been exactly the same as it was back when I started, but it's certainly also added to the stress. Digital transformations can sometimes feel like they're fundamentally changing what we do and how we do it. And for some, that feels threatening. But it does really also provide opportunities. I think Amina mentioned yesterday the Gutenberg press, and just thinking about printing, and how technological advancements have changed that. I mean, first of all, it made it safer, and we didn't have to worry about hot metal all over the place. And I'm pleased to say that wasn't in my working lifetime anyway, just in case anyone was in any doubts. But also it's enabled us to think more flexibly about how we print, printing outside of the UK, thinking about how we can, use printing more suitable for specific needs, speed it up, reduce costs, and of course now with POD, thinking about how we can make it closer to the customer and more sustainable. So that's a sort of an example of how technological advancements, how at each stage some of those have felt quite scary and really radically changed how we do things, but have been so important for enabling us to do things better and smarter. So how do we come through those disruptions that are affecting publishers? How do we use them to help us serve our customers better? And specifically, how do we as university presses, who don't always have the reserves that the really big guys, and I know you think that we're a big university press, but we're so much smaller still than many of the big commercial publishers. We don't have the same reserves. So how can we respond to that? As I've said, digital disruption has been here for a very long time. This is just looking back over a few decades and with just a few examples, but some really, really significant changes has happened in this time. Can anybody else in the room remember the time when, if you received a floppy disk with a manuscript, you threw the floppy disk in the bin because you didn't have a computer on your desk? Those were the days. And I'm sure there's some people in the room thinking, what is a floppy disk? We'll explain that later. And in some ways, life seemed simpler back then. We didn't get emails at 7 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock at night that suddenly you needed to respond to. You didn't get heckled even by social media. But it was also harder. How on earth did we do desk research before Google? I've no recollection of how we did that. But that change has really been a constant since then. I remember when I started at Cambridge, some people said to me, God, change is so exhausting. Can you just make it stop? No. And it has sometimes been challenging, and it has fundamentally changed what we do. But it has helped us with how we're providing the services. Sometimes that change is directly around the digital impact. So, for example, journals going online back in the mid-1990s, of course, that's digital disruption happening specifically. But open access, not directly a digital disruption, but it was only enabled because of journals going online. So sometimes we're not really able to see the consequences of those technological advances. I've got 2 buttons I'm pressing here, and I'm more than I can possibly cope with, clearly. And the pace of change is clearly not slowing down. Digital innovations are happening all around us. The poster children of this are clearly generative AI and AI. If anyone in this room manages to go through a week, probably a day, without having a discussion about the impact of AI, I would love you to tell me how you manage that. But there's so much more going on in terms of technological and digital advances. And thinking about learning, how are students learning, whether that's in school or in university, and how it's changing how people learn, the behaviours of students, the behaviours of instructors, the students' attention span, their expectations. All of that is being changed radically. So that's changing what we need to be thinking about as publishers who provide content to them. But I've just listed some examples here. And that change can feel like it's really helping us deliver our mission. And I think that digital disruption can be harnessed in a really positive way. It can help us work smarter. It can help us reach more people. In a print world, we were limited by quite often with how people could access our content. I mean, it's one of the great themes running through some of the conversations during this conference has been around accessibility. And for all publishers, but especially for university presses, we're driven by our mission to increase the impact of the content that we publish. So we want more and more people to be able to access that information. And, today is Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and, digital availability of our content is really, really helping us increase that accessibility. You just have to think about alt text for images, screen readers, developments to make text more accessible for neurodiverse readers. Those are just a few of examples of what we're now able to do because of the technology that's available to us. Each one of those can feel like it's another thing to do. And we know that in many cases, we're doing all of the things we used to do and now having to build on these new developments. And that can be a real challenge. But it's how do we tackle that? And I think for me, one of the biggest challenges is actually how do we stop doing some things and how do we really focus on the new things that are adding most value to our readers today? And that's possibly one of the disruptions that as university presses we're least good at tackling because we care so much about the values that we've got, and we're so worried that if we stop doing any of those things, we're going to lose our intrinsic value. And I think we need to challenge ourselves more on really what the value is we're adding today, and to make sure that we are really making the most use of the technology that's available now. But some of those technological advancements just feel like a constant onslaught. That barrage of stuff. Piracy, it was always there. Let's face it, people used to photocopy our books and pile them high in shops, and that was always a risk. But it's a lot easier for people to pirate our content now, and it's whack-a-mole. And we know that as soon as you get one takedown, and something else comes up in 14 different places and you have to keep on bashing them all. That's just one example of how the technological onslaught is affecting us all and does make life harder. So how do we grapple with that? And I'm really conscious that being relatively small does make some of these changes and challenges feel even harder because we've got limited resources. Although I would say every organisation has limited resources. No organisation of any size just thinks we can do everything we want. Every organisation has to make choices within the resources they've got. But being relatively small does mean that it's harder for us to feel in control. We want to feel that we're making the change rather than the change being done to us. Everybody wants to feel in control of change. So how do we get to that point? So I wanted to give a couple of examples of where university presses have really approached digital disruption differently. I was at Oxford University Press in 2004, but I will claim absolutely no credit for this. Oxford University Press, OUP, flipped nucleic acid research in 2004 to open access. It was the first big traditional subscription journal to be flipped open access. It was driven by the editorial board, the editor-in-chief, and the then managing director for OUP, who all believed in the benefits of open access. It was a massive risk. NAR was at the time, and I don't know if it still is, but was at the time the biggest revenue and profit generator on the journals list for OUP. For them to take that risk was really, really significant, but they did it because they were a university press who believed in the benefits of open access, and this was a good thing to do, and because they were able to take a long-term perspective on that change. And that's something that I think is really important for us as university presses to embrace. With some of the digital disruptions, that it's harder for the commercial publishers to do. We're able to take that longer-term view of the benefits of things, and I think the flipping of NAR was a really good example of that. There are also times when actually university presses have been able to achieve more through collaboration. Many of you will have been at the great session yesterday about collaboration across university presses. And I think when there's so much change happening, and addressing some of that change can be challenging, can be mind-bendingly hard, can be expensive, where can we collaborate? Where can we do more together? Where can our shared mission enable us to do things that others can't, or that others can because their pockets are deeper, and we know that we need to do that? So I put a couple of examples here, but there are many, many more. So MIT Press and MIT Media Lab, obviously both part of MIT, but they're two parts of the same university collaborating to create Knowledge Futures, which is now really innovating in the digital infrastructure space. Project Muse, obviously been going around for a long, long time, but thinking about that time when putting journals online was really expensive and people didn't have not all publishers had the means to do that. Johns Hopkins University Press, collaborating with their library, created Project Muse, enabled journals to go online that might not otherwise have had that opportunity. And sometimes university presses have harnessed the power of online technologies, digital technologies, to be able to fulfill missions. So a few more examples up here, and you might say this isn't really disruption, this is just using technology, but how are we as publishers grabbing the opportunities that are there and thinking about how it can make us better, enable us to do what we want to do smarter, faster, more effectively? So Luminos from the University of California Press, online experimentation. I think they, again, just really put themselves out there in trying to think about new models. Global Sciences Challenges from Bristol University Press, obviously the winner of the 2024 IPG Independent Academic Professional Publisher of the Year Award. Congratulations. They're not the only publisher who is using digital publishing to focus on the UN SDGs, but I think it's a great example of thinking about how those technologies can enable us to deliver our mission better. And then I put an example of COVID-19 up on the screen, or a logo for COVID-19. I don't know if can the virus have a logo? I'm not sure. It felt like maybe it did had a branding agency out there, didn't it? I think many of us those of us who publish in this space, made our relevant content available for free, and that helped to accelerate critical developments in the search for a vaccine. And the same drive to provide wider communities with access to high-quality, evidence-based information also led many of us to make content free around Black Lives Matter. So I think there's great examples there, again, of just thinking, how can we use these technologies smartly to do what we want to do? How can we use them to help us be university presses better in today's world? Obviously, I'm going to have a case study from Cambridge. So I'm going to talk a little bit about open access at Cambridge. So, 10 years ago, we were being disrupted by open access. We are a largely humanities and social sciences based publisher in our journals list. Open access was happening around us, and wasn't just true for us. This was happening for many smaller publishers, and particularly in the humanities and social sciences. It was really happening around us, and it was being driven by, and is being driven by, the STEM publishers. It was unclear what it was going to mean for HSS journals, and one of the really disempowering parts of that is it meant it was really hard for us to talk with any confidence to our society partners about what it was going to mean for them. 2/3 of the journals that we publish are owned by societies, and yet we didn't really have a good long-term story for them about what open access was going to mean. So how can we really be their trusted partner if we're saying it's going to be really tough, but we're not quite sure what it's going to be? We needed to have a stronger narrative to be their publishing partner. And longer term for us, what was it going to mean? And so back in 10 years ago, we had about 3% of our research articles were open access. We made a conscious choice over the coming years to take a much bolder approach and thought, we need to get on the front foot with this. We need to own this transition for Cambridge. We need to be part of the disruptive force, owning the change rather than having that change done to us and around us. And the consequences of that could have been that we wouldn't have had a successful future for all of our journals. So we've really worked hard to develop models that work for our journals and our partners. We've really used that then to have a bigger voice in the discussion, making sure that the voice of HSS journals can be heard. And because we're being seen to be very positive about this transition to open access, I think that's giving us more credibility. When we say, no, this isn't working, because we're saying, look, these things are working. We're happy to take risks here. We really want to make this work, and people can see we're committed to the shift to open access. When we point out the things that aren't working, it gives us more credibility in those conversations. Critically is enabling us to transition faster, and I'll say more about that in a moment. And it's giving us a real optimism about the open access future. Somebody asked me yesterday what I still get excited about at work. I think that seeing our journals transition to open, thinking about the benefits of that, is something that still gets me really excited. So where are we? We are moving through the transition really successfully. I think this first phase of the transition, we feel very confident about the success that we've achieved. So 63% of our research content was open access in 2023. That's going to be significantly higher this year, and that is in part because in large part because of the fact we've got over 2,000 institutions covered by transformative agreements. We've also been focused on new open access launches that aren't just more journals. We're thinking about how we can use the technology and the opportunities in more innovative launches. We have had to keep on going with operational changes. We could have a whole session on how open access requires you to think differently about your operational systems. I wouldn't be smiling quite so much through that presentation. It's quite hard work. One of the things we've done last year, was launch the Cambridge Open Equity Initiative. We all know that one of the risks of open access is we take away the barrier for some people to read and replace it with a barrier for some people to publish. We're really conscious that cannot be something that applies to Cambridge authors. We have to have an equitable publishing platform and an approach, and therefore it was important for us to think about how we manage that, and the Cambridge Open Equity Initiative was one of the models we're using to ensure that we can have a broad waiver programme. We've also been thinking about what open access means for our humanities and social sciences journals that publish a lot of non-research content. If you're flipping a journal to open access, but 40–50% of it is non-research content, how are you going to pay for that extra content? So we've launched the Research Open model to enable that. So we are projecting that in 2025, over 80% of our research articles will be open access, and that's going to keep on going up. This year, we flipped 40 journals to open access, which means we've now got over 100 journals open access, and that will be flipping far more than 40 journals, a number being finalised as we speak, but it will be significantly in excess of 40 journals next year. So we've come a long, long way in our journey on open access. I keep on feeling like if you think about your horizons or whatever, we've hit Horizon 1. Unfortunately, at Horizon 1, we can now see Horizon 2. And there's quite a lot to do to meet that set of challenges. We knew when we embarked on this bold path that there were going to be more challenges in the way. And so it wasn't that we sort of have been surprised by the fact this is hard, but we can now see in more detail what those challenges are. So, for example, our average cost per research article often exceed the revenue that we are getting per article from some of our transformative agreements. We are projecting a decrease in revenue and therefore profits as we see many of our subscribers publishing little or no articles with us, and therefore they will stop paying us over time. So whilst there was a comment yesterday that there's enough money in the system, that may well be true, but it's in the wrong places, and it's going to be very difficult in some cases to access all of that. We're going to have to keep, despite that drop in revenue, despite that drop in profits, we're going to have to keep on investing heavily in new workflows and infrastructure. As I've said, we're HSS heavy. That means that we have a lot of low output journals, and those journals quite often have high non-research output. One of our biggest costs is how much we pay to societies. In fact, no, not one of our biggest costs. Our biggest cost is how much we pay to societies. And that's a challenge because we need to work with them to talk about how we manage those costs as well as our internal costs. And one of the biggest challenges, I think, in all of this now is not just the shift to open access, but the wider technological advances mean that we've been talking about the risk of publishers being disintermediated for some time. But I think as we imagine more and more content being available through more and more different sources, the brands that people have come to trust could get diminished. So how do we really ensure that being a publisher still matters to people? People coming to us, coming to our journals is still really important. We see a world where high-quality journals should still matter to our authors, and we believe it will, but we do think there's some more challenging conversations to have about some of the other journals and content that there is. So it's time for us to disrupt again. Charles talked about university presses reclaiming open access to help us fulfill our mission. And I really don't think this is the point for us in journals to give up on open access either. It would be. I did hear someone saying a while back, maybe we just need to take a pause on open access. I totally disagree with that. If we think about this from a mission point of view, as Charles said, this is so important for how we can get more of our content out to more people. For all of the reasons Charles said it about books, it's just true for journals. It's not going to be easy, but it is possible. But it's going to take us collectively to really embrace that change. And one of the points that Chris made when talking to the librarians yesterday is we need to be working together on this. They need to step up, we need to step up and really address the change. We've got to be transparent about both the real opportunities that open access bring, but those challenges as well. How can we work through that? How can we not just say, oh, the librarians need to sort this, the funders need to sort that, the authors need to change what they do. We're all in this together. We've got the benefits that we're going to get together, so we've got to look at those shared solutions. Those models that we move to have got to reflect the realities, whether those are behavioural, economic, digital. So thinking about, what do authors really care about? No one is going to stop authors wanting to publish in their #1 journals, and we shouldn't be trying to stop them doing that. We should be enhancing and thinking about the value they get from that. But we should be questioning, why are authors publishing in their 7th choice journal? Because they're still being driven to publish in any old journal. What is happening in that space? Why is more and more content being published? We need to really understand that and challenge it. And that does involve this sort of cross-stakeholder engagement. So, a lot happening in open access for us. And I hope that the logic of what I'm saying in terms of disruption is, it is a disruptive space. It's a really disruptive space. But as university presses, how do we think about what we can do and how we can be on the front foot with that and not feel browbeaten by it? So what does this tell us about our approach to other digital disruptions? And hey-ho, I'm going to talk about AI very briefly, partly because I would quickly get out of my depth. Not that always stops me, but on this particular occasion, it will. So we are clearly, as an industry, as a society, as individuals, being disrupted by generative AI. That's as true in research publishing as it is absolutely everywhere. We can see all of the established players and startups getting out there in so many parts of the process, which is both really exciting. When you think about what we're going to be able to do with generative AI, your mind starts to bend how we can do things better. But it's also exhausting. And I don't know about everybody else who's in their 50s in the room, but sometimes it makes me feel really old. It's also true in education, and in fact, possibly even more true in education. How students are going to learn, how they're going to engage with content, what they're going to expect from their content, what they're going to just accept from ChatGPT or the equivalent rather than going to a trusted textbook, how virtual tutors or AI tutors are going to be able to support better learning outcomes. There's both real threats and really exciting developments there. Outsell did this survey saying that actually there was, I've just shown you lots of examples of things that are happening on products and services. A lot of publishers right now are focused internally. So this is only a sample of 10 publishers, so it's probably not totally representative, but chatting to a lot of people, I do get the sense that a lot of us are focused on or thinking about, are there ways that either we can do things using AI, I don't know if anyone's using sort of Copilot or, to think about how you can do things better, faster, smarter, or how our suppliers are using AI. But I think this is a time when we can start to think about what we want to do. There's another side of the AI discussion that I just wanted to also mention, and that's the licensing of our content to LLMs, for example. Many of us have probably been approached by the big companies who want to license our content, and that can feel like a disruption that we're not quite sure which way to go. On the one hand, we're worried about what they're going to do and how the services they provide are going to change behaviours, and is there a risk if our content's in that it's going to accelerate the risk to our content and into our sales models? Or do we want to jump on that bandwagon and think, right, okay, they're going to give me some money, let's take that now? Trying to navigate our way through that. We've been having a lot of conversations. We've gone for what we think is a considered middle approach, in that we are engaging with some of the big people who are trying to license our content, but we have set some really clear guidelines on criteria on what we are prepared to work with. We're expecting our content to be cited. We're ensuring that only so much can be included. We're also talking to suppliers to make sure that they are very clear about when they can use our content to train their LLMs, and more specifically, largely when they can't use our content to train their LLMs, because we're really worried that otherwise the content is just going to get float will go into their training models. One of the things, though, we've done with the licensing is we've taken the decision to give authors a choice to opt in to their content being included in licensing deals. So we have just started a program of writing to, in the first phase, 7,000 authors, and it will go beyond that, to ask them if they want to opt in. If they do not opt in, we will not be licensing their content to the big providers. And we feel that one of the things that's important in this disruption for us is that we don't lose our integrity and don't lose our value as a university press, as somebody who looks after the author's rights. So this is something we feel that puts us on the right side of that. We're trying to seize the opportunity, think about what it can mean in terms of benefiting authors' profile of their content, but protecting their rights, because we do think this is a new right that needs to be licensed specifically. So, with all of that AI stuff, it can feel like it's another thing that somebody's just, you're on the treadmill before and they've cranked it up from 5 to 9, and we're having to run even faster. And that can be a little bit hard. So I was just thinking about what does this really mean for us, and thinking again about the open access example. I think there's a feeling sometimes that this stuff is happening now, so we've got to decide now what to do about it. But actually, when you think about the technology adoption curve, we've got choices. We don't have to all be early adopters to be successful. We can adopt the technology at different places and make that conscious choice that now isn't the right time for us. We've got other things that are priorities. We're doing other things, and that's fine for us. And to feel that not apologetic about it or scared by it. We might work with somebody else who's adopting faster. We might use a supplier. But our choice is when we adopt. And I think that can be quite empowering. So going back to the open access example for Cambridge, we were not on the first wave because it wasn't right for us to be. But we did become a conscious adopter later, and really made sure we were using that to our advantage. So it's about picking our battles and finding those opportunities that work for us. Most university presses are not going to be at the cutting edge of adopting AI. We're not probably going to be the visionaries in the first wave that really think radically differently about how AI can get research content out to more people. But I don't think that means we won't be the disruptors in due course, because again, coming back to that long-term vision, there will be a point where we're prepared to take a risk that others cannot. But we don't have to do that right now, and don't need to feel apologetic about it. So, will we be disrupted? Absolutely. Can we disrupt and differentiate ourselves? Absolutely. I think this is something that being part of University Press can, as I've just been saying, can really enable us to think more radically about things. It doesn't mean we've got to do it all at once, though. I think settings like this enable us to think both individually, picking up ideas off each other's. We're bound to all be joining the dots in things that suddenly make sense, balls drop into place. But we don't have shareholders we're accountable to, so therefore we can think long term. And that can mean sometimes that we're able to think differently about disruption and about the digital environment that we're working in. In some cases, and I'm just going to come back to something I said earlier, that does mean the most radical thing we're going to have to do is stopping doing some other stuff and working out what that is to give us the space for the new stuff we need to be engaging with. And I know that's really difficult. I know, and in fact, I'm probably one of the worst people to say that, because I can say those words so simply, and I find it really difficult to do myself. Change doesn't have to be bad. Going back to what people said to me when I joined Cambridge, can we stop change? No, we can't. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes it makes us just tired. But sometimes it's really exciting. And sometimes it enables us to do our jobs better, smarter, thinking about accessibility, thinking about sustainability, thinking about how we deliver our mission, getting our content out to more people. If you think about change through that lens, think about what it's empowering us to do, rather than thinking about how hard it is, that can be really exciting. So I'd encourage you, whenever something is kind of feeling like that onslaught, think about it through, how can it help us do things better and smarter and faster? That can be quite exciting and can help give you the energy to get through all of this. So with that, I wanted to leave it there really and take questions and hopefully open up for discussion, because I would be interested in the disruptions that you're seeing and the challenges that you're seeing that are making your lives difficult. And are there things that we should be talking about as an industry and as a collective group of university presses, that how can we be part of a disruptive force? I do genuinely think that the shared missions that we've got give us an opportunity to be a disruptive force together in a way that publishing sometimes backs away from as a whole. And as university presses, we can do something a bit differently. So with that, happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mandy. We'll now open questions to the audience.
Or not, and we can all just go and get lunch. Sorry.
Hi, Kim Williams at Princeton University Press. There's so much in there, Mandy, that's so rich, and about 1 million questions, I'm sure, will come up. One of the things I've been thinking about in this space is what we stand for as university presses, what's left, as with what feels like a rush to technology and a rush, as you were talking about, all of our partners who are adopting AI, the variability of the response, the hallucinating. Is there something university presses can do together that is about our values and be disruptive in taking a hold of, we stand for peer review, we stand for truth, we stand for accuracy, we stand for thoughtfulness?
Yeah.
Are there other ways this is already happening, or are there ways we can come together to do more on that?
I mean, I loved Charles's graphic earlier about the sort of showing those extra steps in peer review that we all embrace. I would just say that there might be some commercial publishers who didn't have the middle step of peer review. Sorry. I have spoken to a couple recently who shocked me with what they had to say on that, because their targets for commissioning were so high. So I absolutely do think, I think around peer review and research integrity, and thinking of those two things as separate things, and how do we tackle them separately, because peer review feels to me like it's really thinking about the value of the content and the interest of the content, and how do we make sure it's adding something to the research literature, whereas research integrity is it good quality? Is it fraudulent? So those two things, I think, require quite different approaches, and perhaps research integrity, and that might be something that affects the journals publishers more than the books publishers at the moment, but the journals publishers world is really, that's another big area for us, whole conversation around paper mills and others. I think that's something we could be talking about. How can we, there's a lot of work happening across publishers already around research integrity, but whether there's a different approach that we could take there. But I think around peer review, for us to stand up for that beautiful graphic that Charles had, and saying our peer review really does set us apart. Being a university press matters. And again, I know there are other publishers in the room who aren't university presses, and many of you will say you care about quality as well, and I don't doubt that for a second. But being a university press, it's what we're here for. As an old chief executive of mine from another university press said, commercial publishers publish in order to make money. University presses make money in order to publish. And I've always found that just a really nice way of saying we do many of the same things, but for different fundamental reasons. And I think that for me feels really important. Thank you.
Well, just there.
Hi, Tom Clark, Boydell and Brewer. I was with the slides on the huge quantity of players, basically, and who help and elevate, but also are disrupting the application of AI, the use of technology. What do you think about? I mean, disruption can also occur when those things go wrong. So, it's the mission and the attempt to be an, again, elevated press ideology and et cetera, but the disruption can also come from things collapsing.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
How do we form a view on, because I mean, I try and have an approach so that when someone pitches me another new technology or consultancy, that I'm not just going, oh wow. So this is why I struggle. Yeah.
Yeah. I think with generative AI, that's one of the big challenges right now, that there's so much happening and trying to work out which bits we should be engaging with and which bits we should just be leaving well alone. And most of us in this room do not have the teams available to be testing everything and to check everything and to be looking wisely at all of the opportunities. And that's why I think thinking about that adoption curve and for some of us, accepting that we're not going to be in that first wave of adoption and that being okay and letting some others make the mistakes. For us as publishers generally, but I think particularly as university presses, loss of our reputation is probably more important to us than being slightly slower to adopt. If we get it wrong in the adoption and start using hallucinated content, for example, that could be far more damaging to us than adopting a good technology 6 months later than others. One of the things that many people are talking about is, should we be using generative AI to help create abstracts for content or marketing materials or whatever, or lay summaries of content? All of those things, it's certainly possible using generative AI. Thinking about, is it good enough for us, is a question that we have to all ask ourselves, I think.
Hi, Julia Mortimer from Bristol University Press, and thanks for an inspirational talk, Mandy, and for giving our Global Social Challenges Journal a shout-out. I wondered about the issue with LLMs, because I think that's something that we're all really, we're having to face quite quickly, and how that squares with open access, because you were talking about the protecting the author's rights, asking the authors, but if content's out there with CC BY licenses, how do we control that?
Yes. To be honest, once an author has signed a CC BY license, an LLM can ingest that content and use it in any way they want. That is a choice. No, I was going to say it's a choice an author made. That would suggest they understood that. I think we all know that authors don't really understand what a CC BY license means. Many of us feel that the CC BY license was never fit for purpose in the first place, but it is now the norm. There might be opportunities to, and I know there are discussions about pushing back on that. I'm looking at Chris because I know he feels very strongly about it. I suspect that ship has sailed, but I think the more we can educate authors about the choices they're making, the better. But content that is already under a CC BY license, that is perfectly within the rights of the LLMs for them to ingest in any way they want. As long as they then cite the content, they still have to cite it.
Hi, I'm Jo from Bristol University Press. But we're at the start of the AI journey and discussions at Bristol, and I just wondered how you're managing allowing staff to play with it and experiment, and whether you've brought in policies of what can and can't happen at Cambridge, and whether we can learn any lessons from what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we do have we have various committees. We do have quite a few committees now. So we do have a policy about what you can and can't do. You clearly can't put any unpublished content into a public LLM. You can't put any financial or confidential data into an LLM. LLM. Why did they make it so hard to say these things? And who came up with the name ChatGPT? I mean, really? Anyway, so yes, we do have some policies about what you can do. Any experimentation has to go through a committee to check the way we're doing it, to make sure that we're not breaching sort of confidentiality or doing anything really daft. We also very quickly came up with a policy for authors to make it clear that ChatGPT and other similar products cannot be an author, shouldn't be cited as an author, and the person author has to accept responsibility for the content that's and got their name associated with it. So they're welcome to use any tool they want to, but they have to accept responsibility for that content. So yes, we do have both internally facing policies and external policies for authors.
Hi, Dara Snowden from ECL Press. Thank you so much, Mandy. My question was around how you feel about digital disruption and being in step or taking a leadership role with your parent institution. Do you feel we as university presses need to be in step with our institution when it comes to things like AI policy, where they're having to grapple with a lot of decision making around how students and researchers are using different kinds of digital technologies? Or do you feel that we take more of a leadership role and can feed back to our institution? I'd love to hear a bit more about what you think that relationship could look like.
For me, the expression in step is a really good one, because I think it is about communication with our parent institutions. It doesn't mean we're always going to make the same decisions, because we've got different use cases. But I think not ignoring what they're going through and then being aware of what we're doing. So we are talking a lot to the AI committees at the university, and of which there are also many. I've been on AI panels within the university talking about how AI is affecting education. We're working in collaboration with them. I don't think our policies will always be exactly the same, but I think keeping each other informed as we go, so that we're making those we have awareness, and we're not missing an opportunity for alignment or sort of being misaligned without knowing about it. If that makes sense.
I think we have time for one more question.
A playful one again. If, say, in humanities, the collation of material by an author is a job, so they're going through historical records. If an AI essentially ingests everything, the LLM point, do you think the role of stewarding content that is essentially only driven by AIs will replace the author, and we should have a role in that?
How is that a playful question?
It's conceptual.
I mean, I think this is where exactly what AI is going to do long term is something that we can't yet know. I have no doubt it is going to play a massive part in tasks like that and many, many others. But we had a presentation at a global leadership team recently, from Sir Anthony Seldon, who was brilliant. If anyone ever needs a speaker, I'd thoroughly recommend him. He was great. He was really emphasising the human side of that's required in so many tasks. That yes, generative AI can do lots of mundane things really quickly, and that's great. But that's never where the value was. The value was on the insights, the extractions that are done from that, the thinking about it. And that's what a human is still going to be able to do. So hopefully we will get to a point where some of those things can be done faster, don't require people sitting in darkened libraries for half of their lifetime, but they can still add the real value to that content. But I have no idea how that's actually going to pan out, because I'm afraid my crystal ball has taken a day off. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy, and thank you for the questions. The next sessions will begin around past. The parallel session in here will be on What Authors Want, chaired by Alex Thompson, and the parallel session in Prestonfield will be on the European Accessibility Act. I've also been asked to mention, if you go by the book stand, you can take as many books as you want home, because they're all going.